I think the advantage of studying here at Ravinia is priceless because of the instructors that we have here. They're all top-notch. They're all the best on their instruments. Plus, they know what music is all about. Music in the sense, you know, it's one thing to play your instrument, but it's another thing to make music. And the people that we have here at Ravinia are aware of the necessity to be proficient on your instrument. That's just half the battle. After you're proficient on your instrument, then can you make music? And that's kind of what I listen to. Usually young people, look, ma, no hands. Look how fast I can play. Look how loud I can play. But playing musically can sometimes be a challenge until you come to visit with the Ravinia people we have here, Rufus and Billy Childs. All right. Hello. So at the end of the bass solo, or during the bass solo, what's your name? Jonathan. You had to help him out. You notice he got the end of his solo, and you kind of, the reason the audience didn't respond better is because you were kind of doing the same thing coming out of his solo that you were about to do going into the next section. Dynamics are so important. Play a short version of a ballad, any ballad. So, or is this the only tune you all know? This the only one you prepared? Have you played together before? Any, like a ballad? Yeah, we can play a ballad. You play a ballad? Sensitivity. You know, we're hearing a lot of up-tempo and articulation, and which is important. Articulation and communication is so important. We're high on articulation today, so far. Everybody can play their instrument, but communication is so important too. And realizing that, like I said before, these people, they haven't had college level music. You know, when I was coming up, it was entertainment. Jazz was entertainment. It wasn't education. You know, people worked hard during the week. They came out on Saturday night. And they wanted music they could either dance to, make love to, or eat dinner to, whatever. It's progress now to where we can play some more advanced kind of music, which is great. But we had to always be aware of our audience in terms of dynamics. Dynamics is the best way to get an audience's attention. And when he was taking the solo, I watched how you came out of it, how he came out of it. Be aware of that, please. Let me hear a ballad. Any ballad. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Now let me hear the beginning of the first piece you played.
One, two, 1, 2, 3.
Okay. Thank you. Well rehearsed. How often do you all play together during your session here? This group? For how long?
3 hours.
And when you leave here, you'll never see each other until you come back here, if you come back, right?
We'll try to.
But it's good lessons that Nathan Davis and Billy Childs and Rufus Reid are teaching you. I can tell by the way you're playing that they're doing a good job, and you all are doing a good job of listening to them. It's so important to always be aware of your audience, to be able to articulate on the instrument. I notice all of you, your group and the previous group, to not only be the best you can be on your instrument, but get to the point where you don't have to think about your instrument at all. You become a part of the music. And you become part of the group. You always have to be listening. If a musician has not learned his instrument, then he's stumbling and can't be aware of what the other instrument. You got to communicate not only with the play dynamically with each other on stage. The audience becomes a part of what you're doing. You're successful. The audience doesn't know this, and I never tell them. You're successful if they become a part of what you're doing up here on stage. They become so involved in listening. The group as a whole, that they send positive energy up here, you're sending positive energy out there, and they're the sixth member of your group. And they walk away saying how great you are. You all are, but you all walk on stage. Wasn't that a great audience? Well, that's because you're all connected. When audiences walk away and say, well, what were they doing? Did you get it? No, I don't know. And then you all walk off the stage and say, what was wrong with that audience? Why, they were rah, 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 rah. Articulation, communication. There's another word I had written down here. Well, it'll come to me. Wonderful, thank you. When I was coming up, we didn't have concert situations, you see. We played in corner taverns, bars, what have you. And the way the audience let you know that what you're doing is not happening, they would start talking to each other, and some people would start turning their backs to the bandstand. Some of them would walk out. So it was trial by fire. So we learned the hard way. What did I do tonight that I lost the audience? What was I playing that during the middle of the show, we didn't have shows, during the middle of the set, people started talking, getting up, going to get drinks. You know what I mean, right? And sometimes young people aren't aware of what we had to do in those days. We had to play arrangements and songs that reached out and touched. Some of these arrangements are a little intricate, but even with that, musicians have to say, now how can I convey what I'm thinking and feeling and the hard work I put in to the audience? Because if the audience doesn't get involved emotionally to where they forget they're sitting there, where they're actually up here on stage with you. They start pulling for you. And they start, now you got it. So after so many years of playing around Chicago and learning the hard way of people getting up, walking out on you, those are some of the things that we learned. These kids are blessed to have Rufus and Nathan and Billy Childs to coach them. And then to get to play with each other, and these are some of the hot shots from around the world, of course. So that's important. I'm killing time is what I'm doing. But those are experiences from growing up and not having. I think in 1966 I played Ravinia. In the 50s there was nightclubs and bars. And that's quite an experience. The kids don't have nightclubs and bars now, you know, where you learn the hard way. The bar gets quiet when you're doing your thing. When you're not doing your thing, they start talking, turning their back, and start yawning on you. That means he's bored. Okay, then play. Sorry. Who wrote the piece? You wrote the piece. Sound like you wrote the piece. Once again, maybe it takes time for musicians to become aware of dynamics. Or maybe I'm just from another time. It's important that there's actually a distinct difference between mezzo forte, forte, pianissimo. And when you go through a whole song, and it's pretty much mezzo forte and forte, after a while the ear becomes, we're aware that each one of you is proficient. Each one of you is playing your ass off. But what about the music? This is not just your group. Young people have to be aware of the music. What do I mean when I say music? I've been repeating myself this afternoon. Dynamics, listening to each other. What's the bass player playing? You aware of what she's playing? Sometimes, yeah, I know. Sometimes not. Which is important. Earlier today, I asked the first group, I think, just to play me a ballad, just to play something to cleanse my palate. You're a fine group of musicians. That piece is wonderful. The articulation's great. I want to hear you play with brushes. What else do you know that you can play?
Would you like a ballad?
It doesn't have to be a ballad. I just want to hear something. Now this has nothing to do with Nathan Davis, Rufus, Reid, and Billy Childs. They have really taken care of business in terms of teaching you all, and you all learning the pieces that you're prepared to play today. This is trying to go a couple steps further into not only listening to each other on stage, but are you aware when you do and don't have the audience? Are you? Sometimes. Sometimes the music just stays up here. We haven't been successful. The performance hasn't been successful if it stays up here. And if they give you polite applause. It's successful when the music crosses the lights. It goes out there, and they emotionally get involved. How do you get them emotionally involved? Either rhythmically, melodically, dynamics, or all three. Not to mention the way you play together, all four. But you all have to be aware of those four things up here. And not be so impressed with, check us out. You all checking each other out. That's important. But that's half the battle. That's half the game. The other half is you occasionally look out, I look out. If I have too many people pulling out there and whatever and looking at each other, then I know that what I'm playing, now they're not doing that to you. I'm just giving you some pointers on when I was your age, a couple of years ago. Play me something else that you haven't polished. But you're going to have to listen to each other to do it. And Mr. Drummer, pick up some brushes every now and then. That's another, let me talk to you. I'm talking to most young drummers, so it's not just to you. It's Sticks Heaven. Bash, 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 and more bash. Bash, bash. You learn how to play the brushes in various ways, depending on who's taking the solo. Sometimes it's easy swish. Sometimes it's, you know Papa Joe Jones, huh? Sometimes it's more rhythmic before you go to the sticks. Poor bass players. Goodness gracious. Sometimes we forget they're back there, especially dynamically. What's the contribution is the bass player making to the front line? Can you hear her? You reacting? Do you know what she's doing? Trying to hear. Well, you figure that one out now. You're trying to hear her, which means you're not being totally successful as a group. Of course, you didn't have a sound check, did you? Yeah, see, so I won't hold that against you. But all that is so important. Ultimate goal is to have these people be the sixth member of your group. And then when they walk out, they're shaking their heads like, wow, wow. They don't know what you did. Were you all aware of them? Were you aware of how they were reacting? We don't know, do we? Do we know if we got them or not? Did we get them? You know, when we walk off the stage back in the day, it was like, did we get them? Yeah, we got them. Well, I don't know. We didn't quite get them. All right, we'll get them next set. Well, you only got one shot. The one shot is to get them, not to play the arrangement perfectly, not to play so good for each other where you're grinning at each other and whatever it is. Success, reaching these people here. Play me something and be aware of these people. Drummer, give me some variety over there. What's your name? Kenneth, give me some variety over there. Sticks, brushes, bigger sticks, smaller sticks, quiet, not so quiet. Let us hear the bass player every now and then. Dynamics. Symphony orchestras, if they played forte all the time, Beethoven would not, nobody would go hear Beethoven, right? The best jazz groups in the world that you all have always admired, whether it's Chick Corea, Keith Jarrett, or Oscar Peterson, whoever it is, played with dynamics. Oh my goodness. It's the sixth member of your group. You got to bring them along. It just occurred to me that young people just have to get to the point in their career where they don't have stage fright. As they were playing, it dawned on me that when I was their age, I probably was a little bashful in front of you all also. How old are you?
Me?
Yes.
24.
24. How old are you? All of you in your 20s? Yeah. Bass player 17. The baby in the group. Well, you know, before, in my day, we didn't have Rufus and Nathan and Billy Childs. We had to learn the hard way. And it's fortunate that Ravinia has this program now where students can come and skip some of the lessons we had to learn the hard way. But if you'll only remember that even when you're playing those intricate arrangements that you and the other two groups learned for tonight, even in those arrangements, it's what are we trying to say and how do we intend to reach the public? What was great about this last song, you had one hurdle already covered because they recognized Stella by Starlight, right? So they didn't have to think about, well, what's that, what they're doing. Now you gotta play new music, you know, don't get me wrong. I'm reminded about incidents when Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie were playing a dance up at the Savoy Ballroom. And they were playing some new music. Up until that point, it was swing. You know, the big bands, people were dancing. And of course, some of the soloists in the big bands didn't get enough solo time. So they said, forget this, let's form a small group, quintet, quartet, trio, whatever, and we can solo as long as we want. So Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie was playing up at the Savoy Ballroom and at a packed house, except the people who hired them to play for a dance. Half the crowd was around the bandstand listening. So we went from swing, where people were emotionally and physically involved in the music, to bebop, to where they're emotionally involved in music, but then it became cerebral. This bebop is an intellectual music. I'm gonna catch flack for that. But you all, you know, it's important that you study the history so you know some of the things I'm talking about. It went from swing to bebop to the smaller groups. But that which had ballrooms packed, which had John and Jane Doe coming, was they could get into the music. They got into the music dancing. All right. And then some of them could come to the bandstand if they didn't want to dance and listen. But the main thing was the emotional output from the band on stage. So even when you're playing your involved arrangements, your arrangements where we're kind of proud of this arrangement because it's almost like, look, Mom, no hands. But even within those arrangements, it's how do we get across the lights to these people out here? And I have no doubt in my mind that you all are going to go on to be some great people. You know, pick up Downbeat one day and say, I was on stage with that young fellow, and it was wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you.